The room was silent after the last of the directors left. Trent remained seated at the head of the mahogany table, fingers drumming once, twice, then still. The figures were still fresh in his mind. $4 million evaporated in a signed rejection. The Omega Race logo stamped beneath a curt email from partners in Texas. He drew a measured breath, smoothed his lapel, and rose. Anger had its place, but not in public. Not even here. He crossed to the cabinet, poured 2 fingers of scotch into a crystal tumbler, and downed it in one swallow. Then, straightening his shoulders, he pressed the intercom. "Jude," he said, his tone calm, almost casual, "bring the car around. We're done for the week." "Yes, sir," Jude's voice came, respectful, hurried. Trent allowed himself a faint smile. The empire would hold. It always did. Tonight was for forgetting. Outside, by the sleek black Mercedes, Jude leaned against the door frame with his phone clamped to his ear. His forehead glistened under the sun, his bald head catching the light as his temper flared. "I said no, Francisca. No means no." His voice was sharp, slicing through the quiet of the compound. On the other end, Francisca's words came softly, hesitant. "But Jude, I only wanted to see Amaka. Just for a few hours. You've been what? Sitting at home like a proper wife should? Don't test me, woman. You think this Lagos is your village? Stay where you belong." He ended the call without waiting for her reply, shoving the phone into his pocket with a scowl. For a moment, he rubbed his scalp, jaw clenched. Then he straightened his tie, the obedient employee once more. Miles away, Francisca lowered the phone from her ear, her lips pressed tightly together. The small rented flat felt heavier suddenly, its silence mocking. She stared at the half-folded pile of laundry beside her, fingers trembling, then sat down on the floor. After a long moment, she picked up a shirt and continued folding, her eyes glassy, but her movements steady. Meanwhile, Trisha's world was drenched in light. She stood in front of a boutique mirror, a sequined gown draped against her frame. Her reflection glowed back at her, high cheekbones, daring short hair, a smile that could melt rooms. She tilted her head, admiring the fit. Her phone buzzed. She answered instantly. "Trent, still shopping?" His voice came, deep and steady. "Of course. The wedding won't plan itself," she said with a laugh, adjusting the fabric. "Besides, someone has to look perfect next to you." He chuckled, though a trace of weariness bled through. "We'll talk details later. For now, clear your evening. I need a distraction." "Done," she replied, already picturing champagne and flashing lights. As she hung up, the salesgirl hurried over with another dress. Trisha's world was one of endless choices, mirrored walls, and credit cards that never declined. And somewhere across town, Francisca pressed a freshly folded blouse to her chest, whispering a prayer for strength, her world held together by silence and obedience. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers, every table heavy with bottles of champagne and delicacies most never tasted twice. Trisha glided through the crowd in a silver gown that shimmered like liquid light, her hand locked firmly around Trent's arm. "Tonight," she whispered with a conspiratorial smile, "we make sure no one forgets the Rices." Trent's jaw tightened. He had barely finished recovering from the sting of the boardroom, and here she was, speaking in superlatives. But the cameras were everywhere. His smile came slow, practiced. The host's voice rang across the microphone. "Next donor, Mr. Trent Race, Omega Race Oil Servicing Company." All eyes turned. Trisha's nails pressed into his arm, urging, demanding. He rose smoothly, buttoned his jacket, and approached the podium. "On behalf of Omega Race," he said, his voice steady, "I pledge 4.5 million naira." Gasps rippled through the room, followed by thunderous applause. Trisha beamed as though she herself had given the sum. Trent bowed slightly, concealing the simmer beneath his calm. Money bled tonight, but appearances would remain intact. Outside, Jude leaned against the SUV, scrolling through his phone. The thrum of Afrobeats spilled faintly from a nearby club, and he half considered slipping away for a quick drink. Instead, he made a run to the nearby suya stand, bargaining over skewers with a casual arrogance. "Driver for that big oga, eh?" the vendor teased. Jude smirked, taking the wrapped parcel. "Bigger than you think, my guy." He tossed a few bills on the counter and strutted back, chewing meat and wiping his hands on his trousers. His phone buzzed again, Francisca's name. He silenced it, irritation flickering across his face. In their modest kitchen, Francisca stirred a bubbling pot, humming faintly to herself. The room smelled of palm oil and pepper, familiar comforts. She reached for salt just as the curtain brushed against the open flame. In seconds, orange tongues licked upward. Her eyes widened. Jesus! She grabbed a rag, swung at the fire, but the cloth ignited instantly. She dropped it, heart racing, and dashed for a bowl of water. Her foot landed on a slick patch, the spilled palm oil she had not noticed. The fall was brutal. Her head struck the tiles, the world flashing white before fading. The pot toppled, splattering hot stew across the floor as the curtain roared. By the time neighbors rushed in, smoke choked the air. Buckets of water crashed over the flames. Hands dragged her limp form away from the fire's hungry reach. When she stirred, coughing weakly, the skin on her arm was blistered, twisted in pain, her body trembling against the floor. Inside the ballroom at the donation, champagne glasses clinked, cameras flashed. Trent smiled politely as he accepted handshakes, the image of generosity. At that very moment, Francisca lay pale and gasping on the smoky tiles, the applause of strangers in some distant hall echoing against her faint cries. The party ended in bursts of laughter and perfume-scented farewells. Jude waited by the SUV, restless, eager to leave the world of tuxedos and clinking glasses behind. Then his phone rang. The tone in his neighbor's voice was frantic, words spilling so fast he struggled to catch them all. "Fire! Francisca! Hospital! Hurry!" His throat tightened. He snapped the phone shut and ran toward the hall entrance. Trent and Trisha emerged just then, Trent adjusting his cufflinks, Trisha glowing with the aftertaste of champagne. "What's wrong?" Trent asked, noticing Jude's alarm. "My wife, Francisca. There was a fire," Jude stammered. She's hurt, Olga." Trent's brow furrowed, sharp and immediate. "Get the car. We're going now." Trisha blinked, startled. "What? Trent, Now, Trisha," he cut her off, tone firm. The drive was tense. Jude's grip strangled the steering wheel, eyes flicking between mirrors in the road, his bald head gleaming with sweat. Trisha leaned back, arms folded, silent disapproval clouding her perfect posture. Trent sat forward, phone pressed to his ear as he issued quick instructions. When they arrived, the compound was alive with murmurs. Neighbors lingered by the gate, smoke still hanging faintly in the air. Buckets of water stood discarded in the yard, and the charred scent of stew and fabric clung to the walls. Francisca stood unsteadily near the doorway, wrapped in a borrowed wrapper, her skin pale beneath the weak light. Her right arm was bandaged hastily in cloth, her eyes distant, almost ashamed. Jude bolted from the car, pushing past the neighbors. He rushed inside, scanning the kitchen. The scorched curtain hung in tatters, black stains smeared across the wall, the pot of stew overturned on the floor. His jaw set. "Look at this," he muttered, voice hard. "All this damage." He kicked at the pot, ignoring the quiet crowd behind him. When at last he turned to his wife, she lowered her gaze instantly. There was no embrace, no relief in his eyes, only the calculating frown of a man measuring loss. "I'm sorry," Francisca whispered, voice trembling. Trent stepped forward. His tone was brisk, commanding. "Enough of that. Jude, stop staring at burnt tiles. Your wife needs treatment. Let's get her to St. Luke's now." The authority in his voice parted the murmurs. Within moments, arrangements were in place. He dropped his palm over Francisca's shoulders and guided her gently to the car. She stumbled once, and he steadied her, his hand firm but kind. "Easy," he said softly. "You'll be fine." Jude followed, uneasy, but Trent's next words silenced him. "You'll stay with her at the hospital tonight. No arguments." From the SUV, Trisha shifted in her seat, her eyes cool as she watched the fragile young woman being eased into the vehicle. She said nothing, only turned her face toward the tinted window. At St. Luke's, doctors took Francisca quickly. She was examined, cleaned, her burns dressed properly. Her arm was confirmed dislocated, reset with precision. Through it all, Trent stood aside, speaking little, but every prescription, every fee was handled with a swipe of his card and a nod of his head. Jude hovered awkwardly, muttering thanks he did not mean. When Francisca was settled into a ward bed, her breathing calm at last, Trent spoke quietly to the doctor. "You observe her for a week. No compromises." The doctor nodded. As Trent left the room, he glanced back once. Francisca's eyes fluttered open, meeting his briefly. Gratitude shone there, raw and unguarded. Then she lowered her gaze, her hand clutched tightly against the blanket. 3 weeks later, the flat was quieter, though the scent of antiseptic still lingered faintly around Francisca's corner of the room. Her burns had healed into tender scars, her arm bound in a soft sling. She moved slower than before, careful with every gesture. Jude sat at the table scrolling through his phone, a half-empty beer bottle beside him. He looked up, sneered faintly at the sight of her careful movements. "You almost burnt the house down," he said, "all because you don't know how to cook without drama." Francisca lowered her head. "I'm sorry, Jude. Sorry doesn't fix walls. Sorry doesn't pay for curtains. Do you know how embarrassing it was, people running into my house like that?" He scoffed, shaking his head. "You're lucky Olga Trent was there, or else." His words trailed into a bitter laugh. Francisca folded her hands in her lap, silent. She did not argue. She did not remind him that Trent had covered everything, that neighbors had saved the home. Instead, she whispered again, "I'm sorry," her voice almost swallowed by the hum of the fridge. She turned away, her eyes glistening, and began clearing the dishes with her one good arm. The compound was quiet that Saturday, children's laughter carrying faintly from a nearby street. Jude parked the SUV with his usual swagger, stepped out, and opened the door for Trent. "Welcome, Olga," he said, his grin wide. "The house is fine now, no sign of fire anywhere again." Trent gave a curt nod, his eyes scanning the neat exterior, the freshly painted walls. "Good," he said simply. Inside, Francisca appeared from the kitchen, her sling now gone, though her arm still stiff in its movements. She wiped her hands nervously on her wrapper, eyes downcast until she forced herself to look up. "Sir, Trent," she began softly, words heavy with effort. "Thank you for hospital, for money, for care." Trent tilted his head, studying her. Her accent bent the syllables, her humility trembling in every word. He had heard gratitude countless times before, but never like this, never so unpolished, so real. "You don't need to thank me," he replied gently. "I only did what was right." Jude laughed loudly, stepping into the space between them. "Ah, my wife likes to exaggerate. Small fire, she turns it into story. But see the house, better than before. Curtains, paint, all fresh. No need to disturb Olga with long thank you." Francisca's mouth closed quickly, her fingers twisting at the hem of her wrapper. Trent gave Jude a polite smile but returned his gaze to her. "You're healing well?" he asked. She nodded quickly, eyes dropping again. "Yes, better." For a moment, silence hung, awkward, heavy. Then Francisca gathered courage. I make food, just small. For you." Jude waved a dismissive hand. "Ah, leave that. Olga doesn't need village food. We will buy him proper lunch outside." But Trent's eyes softened. "I'd like to taste it," he said. Francisca's lips parted in surprise. She hesitated, then hurried back toward the kitchen, her steps brisk despite the lingering weakness. Trent pulled up his tab, half his attention on the news update, the other half listening to Jude chattering away. Almost an hour later, Francesca returned with a simple plate, jollof rice, fried plantain, and a small piece of fish. She set it on the table, her hands trembling slightly as she placed the spoon beside it. Trent picked up the spoon and tasted. The rice carried a smoky flavor, the plantain sweet and crisp. He looked up, meeting her anxious eyes. "This is very good," he said with quiet conviction. "Better than most of what I eat at parties." Francisca's cheeks colored instantly. She pressed her hand against her wrapper, half smiling, half shrinking. "Thank you, sir. It is nothing." Jude rolled his eyes, chuckling. "Olga, don't mind her. She cooks this every day. Nothing special." He took another spoonful, slower this time, and to his own surprise, he found himself leaning into the taste, savoring it more than he expected. What had begun as a courtesy call was shifting. The meal, simple as it was, stirred a genuine interest. It wasn't the wealth around him that held his attention now, but the quiet woman before him whose food carried warmth no banquet could buy. He watched as Francisca tried to disguise her blush with a lowered head. The awkward modesty, the way she struggled with words, the food itself charmed him more than he wished to admit. He placed the spoon down carefully. "You've done well, Francisca," she whispered, almost inaudible. "I am glad." Trent leaned back, letting the moment pass. He said nothing further, but inside he carried the image of her shy gratitude, bright against the dull boasting of her husband. They were cruising through the Lekki Expressway when Trent spoke, his voice casual, almost offhand. "Jude," he said, adjusting the cuff of his shirt. "Your wife, she cooks well, very well." Jude's grin spread instantly. "Ah, sir noticed? I tell you, nobody cooks like Francisca. Even I get tired sometimes. That is her real gift." Trent nodded thoughtfully. "I was thinking, perhaps she could cook at the house once in a while. Something simple for me. Of course, she'll be paid for it." Jude's chest puffed with pride. "Why not, sir? In fact, She would be happy for the chance. My wife serving you? She would respect me even more. Trent gave a faint smile, looking back out the window. Arrange it then. When Francisca first stepped into the mansion, her breath caught in her throat. The marble floor gleamed like water beneath her sandals. Chandeliers hung high above, scattering golden light across walls lined with art she could not name. Uniformed staff moved quietly, polished, efficient, their English crisp and quick. She clutched the strap of her small handbag, shrinking into herself. This place is not for me, she thought. I don't belong here. Trent noticed the stiffness in her shoulders as she stood at the edge of the dining room. You're welcome here, Francisca, he said gently, motioning toward the kitchen. Don't let the space trouble you. She glanced up at him, startled, then nodded quickly. Yes, sir. An hour later, the aroma of pepper, ginger, and fried plantain filled the mansion's air. Francisca worked quietly at the stove, her hands steady despite her racing heart. When she brought the food out, Trent dismissed the staff with a small wave. He tasted the stew, then leaned back, satisfied. You have a gift, he said, truly. Her lips curved into a shy smile. Thank you, sir. I try. He studied her a moment longer, then leaned forward slightly. Francisca, you'll come here more often, yes? And since you will, I'd like to arrange something for you, English lessons. Her eyes widened. English lessons? Yes, he said, his tone calm but deliberate. Not as charity, as opportunity. You're intelligent, I can see it. Language will only help you. Francisca lowered her gaze, her fingers twisting the edge of her wrapper. No one had ever spoken to her like that, as if her mind mattered. I don't know if I can, she whispered. You can, Trent said simply, and you will. Think of it as investment, not a favor. For a long moment she stood silent, then nodded slowly. If you say so, sir. Trent smiled faintly. Good, then it settled. Behind her shy gratitude, something new stirred, the fragile sense that perhaps she could grow beyond the walls of Jude's house. The new routine settled quietly into Francisca's life. Twice a week she arrived at the mansion, carrying her small handbag pressed close against her wrapper, her heart racing each time she walked past the iron gates. In the mornings she cooked. In the afternoons, she sat with a tutor Trent had arranged, carefully repeating phrases in English, stumbling over verbs, biting her lip when the words came out crooked. The tutor was patient. Say it again, Francisca. I am learning to cook at the house. She tried. I am learned cook, the house. Better, again. By the end of the hour, her notebook was filled with shaky sentences, and her head throbbed. But she carried the weight of accomplishment with her as she left the study. One evening, Jude stopped her in the corridor, smirking. So, you're a student now, he said, arms folded. Learning English like a schoolgirl? Francisca looked down at her hands. Sir Trent, he said it is good. Jude shrugged, already half distracted by his phone. If it keeps you busy, fine. Just don't expect me to clap for you. He walked away, chuckling. She exhaled quietly, then returned to the kitchen. It was often after lessons that she encountered Trent. He would be on his way to his office, tall and composed, his phone in one hand, his stride deliberate. Francisca, he said one afternoon, pausing at the study door. How was the lesson today? She hesitated, then forced the words out. It was. Good, sir. I learned. A little more. His eyes softened. Good. Keep at it. You're improving. She nodded quickly, lowering her gaze. Thank you, sir. He moved on, but she felt the warmth of his voice lingering behind him, as if it stayed in the hallway long after he left. One late afternoon, as she arranged a tray on the dining table, the sun cut through the chandelier, casting golden streaks across the marble. She turned just as Trent stepped in. Their eyes met. It was brief, or it should have been, yet neither looked away. Francisca's breath caught. She tried to lower her gaze, but something in his steadiness held her still. His eyes were calm, unreadable, but they lingered as though searching for something in her face. The silence pressed in around them, broken only by the faint clink of cutlery as her hand trembled against the tray. Trent's voice came at last, quiet but firm. Everything fine? Yes, sir, she answered quickly, though her voice betrayed her unsteady heart. He gave a slight nod, turning toward the corridor. But as he walked away, she felt the air shift, heavier, charged, as though that single second had stretched longer than it should. Francisca touched the rim of the tray, her fingers trembling. She could not name what she saw in his gaze, nor what stirred in her chest. She only knew that when she blinked, the image remained, bright and unyielding in her thoughts. The lesson had ended, her notebook filled with careful lines of practiced English. But instead of leaving, Francisca lingered in the kitchen. She had promised Trent something special that day. A dish she whispered he must treat, though. The staff had offered to assist, but she politely refused, preferring to work alone. The scent of fresh pepper and ginger soon filled the air, mingling with the faint polish of the marble counters. She moved with practiced rhythm, her wrapper tied snugly, her fingers quick with the knife, the pan sizzling under her touch. For once, she forgot her nerves and let the work steady her heart. "Francisca." The voice startled her. She turned and saw Trent at the doorway, his suit jacket folded neatly over one arm. "Sir," she said quickly, almost spilling the ladle, I am almost finished." He stepped inside, his presence filling the kitchen. "I only wanted to see what you were preparing. It smells better than the restaurant meals I endure daily." She bent her head, trying to hide the sudden warmth in her cheeks. "It is just nothing big, sir. Simple food." At last the dish was ready. She placed the steaming plate on a tray, ready to carry it herself. Trent's voice stopped her. "Allow me," he said quietly. "I'll take it to the table." She hesitated, clutching the edges of the tray. "No, sir, I can—" But he was already reaching for it. Their hands brushed. It was barely a touch, the soft graze of skin against skin. But both froze as if the world had stopped. Her fingers jerked back, the plate wobbling before Trent steadied it with one firm hand. For a moment, silence reigned. The sound of the boiling pot seemed distant, muffled under the weight of their stillness. "Careful," Trent said at last, his voice low, almost steady. "Hot plate." Francisca swallowed, stepping back, her hand pressed against her wrapper as if to erase the feeling. "Yes, sir." Neither spoke further. He carried the plate to the center table himself, his expression unreadable, and she busied herself at the sink, scrubbing furiously at already clean spoons. That night, as she folded laundry back at home, Francisca replayed the moment in her mind. "It means nothing," she told herself firmly. "He is a great man. A man like him would never notice me. I am only the driver's wife, nothing more." She shook her head, forcing her hands to keep working. Jude was already snoring in the other room, uninterested in her day, uninterested in anything but his own sleep. But in the mansion, Trent lay awake in his expansive bedroom, the city lights spilling faintly through the wide glass windows. He had closed his eyes hours ago, yet rest would not come. The memory returned unbidden, the heat of her skin brushing his, the startled look in her eyes, the sharp silence that followed. Such a small thing, accidental, meaningless, yet it pulsed in his mind as if it carried weight. He turned on his side, exhaling. Why should it matter, he asked himself. It was nothing. And yet, as the night deepened, Trent realized he was still wide awake, not thinking of contracts, not of parties, not even of Trisha, but of Francisca's hand brushing his, fleeting, fragile, and unforgettable. It was late afternoon in the mansion's dining room. Francisca had just finished setting down a tray of fried plantain and pepper stew when she heard Trent's footsteps approaching. She turned quickly, smoothing the edge of her gown as he entered. "Good evening, Francisca," he said, loosening his tie. "How was the lesson today?" She hesitated for a breath, then gathered her courage. Her voice came low but careful, each word shaped with effort. "Lesson was very good today, sir. I am learning more." Trent paused, his brows lifting slightly. There was clarity in her tone that had not been there weeks ago. "That was well said," he replied, a genuine smile tugging at his lips. "You've improved." Color rose faintly in her cheeks. She clasped her hands together, forcing herself not to look away. I want to say thank you for giving me this chance." The words, though simple, rolled from her tongue with surprising precision. She had rehearsed them in her notebook, whispering them in her quiet flat at night. Now standing before him, the sentence felt like an accomplishment. Trent studied her for a moment, the faintest pride warming his expression. "You said that perfectly," he said. "You should be proud of yourself." Francisca lowered her head, though this time the gesture was less about shyness than modesty. "I try, every day." "You're succeeding," he said, his tone firm but kind. The silence that followed was comfortable, a new thing between them. She busied herself with the tray, straightening the plates, though they were already neat. He watched her, noting the difference. She was still timid, still hesitant in her movements, but there was something else now, a small spark of confidence that made her presence quietly magnetic. As he reached for the cutlery, their eyes met briefly. Her lips parted, as if she almost had another sentence to offer, but she turned away instead, retreating toward the kitchen. Trent's smile lingered as he sat down. She was changing before his eyes, and though he told himself it was simply the benefit of opportunity, a deeper satisfaction stirred quietly in his chest. The mansion was alive with the sound of Trisha's heels striking the marble floor, her laughter echoing ahead of her like an announcement. Francisca was arranging cutlery on the dining table when the front doors opened and Trisha swept in, a designer bag swinging from her arm. "Darling!" Trisha's voice rang out, directed at Trent, who stood by the staircase. "You won't believe the gown I saw today. Imported. Italian silk. If we don't use it for the wedding, I'll die." Francisca quickly stepped back, bowing her head respectfully. "Good afternoon, Ma," she whispered. Trisha glanced briefly at her as though at a shadow. "Mm-hmm." Her eyes were already fixed on Trent. "Anyway, I told them to hold it for me. $45,000, but worth every cent." Trent descended the stairs slowly, his face unreadable. "That much for a dress?" he asked. Trisha laughed, brushing his concern aside. "It's nothing compared to the image it gives. We'll have governors, CEOs, half the country's press at that wedding. I won't be caught looking ordinary." She dropped her bag onto the sofa, pulling out her phone to show him photographs. Francisca remained by the table, adjusting a spoon here, a fork there, though everything was already precise. Her hands moved mechanically, her eyes lowered, invisible in her own presence. "See? Look at this cut," Trisha said, tilting the phone toward Trent. "And the beadwork, all done by hand. You know, people will talk about this dress for years." Trent nodded faintly, but his gaze drifted. From the corner of his eye, he caught Francisca's small frame bending slightly, her hands careful on the plates, her gown plain but neat. She did not speak unless spoken to. Her humility pressed itself quietly against the air, needing no announcement. Trisha tossed her hair, laughing again. "Oh, and I've already spoken to the planner. We need at least 12 bottles of Dom Perignon per table. Anything less, and people will think we're cutting costs. That would be embarrassing." Francisca bowed slightly as she passed by with a tray. "Excuse me, sir," she murmured, her voice soft. Trent stepped aside for her, his eyes following her for a second longer than necessary. Then he turned back to Trisha, who was still scrolling through her phone, her nails glittering under the chandelier light. "Trent," she said brightly, "you're too quiet. Don't you think the wedding deserves to be remembered as the grandest of the year?" He forced a polite smile. "Of course, it should be memorable." Yet as he spoke, another thought stirred unbidden. Memorable for what? For silk and champagne, or for something more genuine? His eyes flicked once more to Francisca, who set the final spoon in place with quiet care. She did not notice his gaze. She was already retreating to the kitchen. The contrast lingered in his mind, one woman radiant but demanding, the other unseen yet sincere. Francisca was resting on the sofa in her room, her notebook in her hand as she rehearsed, her simple blue gown brushing lightly against her knees. The phone on the table buzzed, startling her. When she saw Trent's name, her heart quickened. She wiped her hands on the fabric of her dress and picked up. "Good evening, sir," she said, her voice soft. "Good evening, Francisca." His tone was warm, deliberate. "I wanted to let you know about something important. Trisha's birthday is coming up next weekend. I'd like you to handle the food preparations. You've done very well with the meals lately, and I trust you." Her eyes widened slightly. "Me? For Madam's birthday?" "Yes," Trent said simply. "It will be a large gathering, but I know you can manage it." She swallowed, her fingers tightening around the phone. "Thank you, sir. I will. I will do my best." There was a pause, then his voice lowered just a fraction, carrying a softness she had never quite heard before. "Francisca, I also want to thank you. The meals you've been preparing, they've been excellent. More than excellent." Her cheeks warmed. She glanced toward the window as if the night air itself might overhear her. "I am glad you like them. I try. Every day." "You succeed," he said. The silence that followed was not heavy, but warm, almost hesitant. The quiet of two people unused to such closeness, but not shrinking from it. She smiled faintly, though no one could see. Just then the door creaked. Jude strode in, his voice loud. "Francisca, who are you talking to, eh? Practicing your Queen's English again?" She stiffened. "It is, Sir Trent," he called. Jude snatched a look at her, scoffing. Sir Trent, always Sir Trent. Listen to you twisting your tongue like you're some madam. You think those lessons make you better? Your accent still sounds like the village." Her face flushed hot. She turned slightly away, lowering her voice, though she knew Trent could still hear. "I am sorry," she whispered. Jude shook his head, laughing harshly. "Sorry? Save that for yourself. Don't embarrass me. speaking like that in front of people who know real English. He moved about the room noisily, grumbling under his breath, oblivious that Trent's voice still hovered on the line. When Francisca finally pressed the phone closer to her ear again, Trent's voice returned, calm, steady, and unshaken. "Francisca," he said, ignoring Jude's noise in the background, "don't worry, you are doing well. I'll speak with you soon about the preparations." The line clicked, and the call ended. Francisca stood frozen, the phone still in her hand. His words replayed softly in her mind, a quiet reassurance that wrapped itself around her heart, even as Jude's mocking laughter echoed through the small flat. The mansion was unusually still that evening. The staff had retreated to their quarters, the chandeliers dimmed to a soft amber glow. In the kitchen, Francisca lingered long after her cooking was done. She wore a plain peach gown, her hair wrapped neatly, her movements unhurried. She hummed softly as she wiped the counters, a tune from her childhood village, the kind of song women sang while pounding yam together under the moonlight. It slipped from her lips unconsciously, filling the large kitchen with a melody fragile yet steady. At the doorway, Trent paused. He had come to check the time on the wall clock but stopped short when he heard her voice. His hand rested against the frame as he listened, silent, allowing the moment to wash over him. When the song tapered off, he spoke. "That's a beautiful tune." Francisca turned quickly, startled. "Sir, I did not know you are here." "I didn't mean to interrupt," he said, stepping into the room. "Where did you learn it?" She lowered her gaze, smiling faintly. "It is from home, from my village. My mother used to sing it when she cooked. I remember her voice when I sing." Trent moved closer, leaning lightly against the counter, his tone calm but intent. "Tell me more." Her fingers tightened around the cloth in her hand, but she found herself speaking anyway. "When I was small, my sisters and I, we would sit outside in the evening. Mama would sing, and sometimes the neighbors would join. It was simple, but it made us happy." Trent listened, saying nothing, his eyes fixed on her. There was no mockery, no distraction, only an attentiveness she was unaccustomed to. She glanced up briefly, meeting his gaze, then quickly looked away. "I'm talking too much," she murmured. "Not at all," he replied softly. "I like hearing it." The air between them thickened. She turned back to the sink, rinsing a bowl just to steady her hands. He remained where he was, the silence stretching, but not uncomfortable, charged, quiet, lingering. Outside the kitchen, one of the maids slowed her steps as she passed the open doorway. She saw Francisca at the sink, Trent nearby, and though nothing improper happened, the sight planted a question. Why is the driver's wife always here? Why does Sir linger when she is around? Later, in the servants' quarters, whispers began. "She comes too often," one said. "And sir, he looks at her differently," another replied. "It is not our matter," the first warned, but the seed had been planted. Inside the kitchen, Francisca finished her cleaning and turned, clutching her small bag. "I should go now, sir. It is late." Trent gave a slow nod. "Yes, thank you, Francisca, for the food and the story." Her lips curved into the smallest smile. "Good night, sir." "Good night." As she walked past him toward the door, the faint scent of spice and soap lingered. He stayed behind a moment longer, staring at the empty counter where she had been, the melody of her song still echoing in his mind. Though no word of impropriety had been spoken, suspicion was already alive in the house, unseen by them, but quietly growing. The mansion pulsed with laughter, perfume, and the clink of crystal glasses. Trisha's birthday was as lavish as she had dreamed. Chandeliers glittered above guests in silk gowns and designer suits, while waiters weaved through the crowd balancing champagne flutes. At the center of it all, Trisha shone in a glittering gold dress, receiving compliments as if they were her birthright. Francisca moved quietly among the staff, her green gown modest yet neat. She had prepared the meals herself, peppered meats, jollof, fish stew, dishes that vanished quickly from the serving trays. But among the polished laughter and camera flashes, she felt invisible, the kind of presence people looked past without ever seeing. Jude, meanwhile, had been drinking since noon. His laughter was too loud, his hand clumsy as he clutched one glass after another. Several men egged him on, enjoying his boisterous energy. My wife cooked all this food," he declared, gesturing broadly toward the buffet. Yes, that one over there." He pointed, his finger heavy, toward Francisca. She froze mid-step, lowering her head as every eye followed the gesture. "You see her?" Jude continued, stumbling a little as he laughed. "Don't let the gown fool you, village girl." She couldn't even say proper English before. It is me who feeds her, clothes her. Without me, she is nothing. A ripple of chuckles ran through the group, half from amusement, half from the alcohol. Francisca's hands tightened around the serving tray she carried. Her face burned as she bowed her head lower, wishing the marble floor would swallow her whole. "Hey, Francisca," Jude barked suddenly. "Lift your head. Why hiding? Don't shame me before my friends." Her lips trembled. She whispered, "Yes, sir," and tried to move past, her steps quick, but the sting of laughter followed her like smoke. Across the room, Trent had been speaking quietly with a business associate. The sound of Jude's voice, sharp, cruel, carrying over the music, drew his attention. He turned, his eyes narrowing at the sight of Francisca shrinking under her husband's drunken ridicule. He set down his glass and crossed the room, his movements measured, his expression calm but unreadable. When he spoke, the noise dimmed at once. "That's enough, Jude." The words were not shouted, yet they cut through the chatter like a blade. The laughter died instantly, replaced by the hush of guests, sensing something larger beneath the moment. Jude blinked, startled, swaying slightly. "Sir, I was only joking." Trent's gaze was steady, firm. A man does not honor himself by mocking his wife, especially not in public. Show her respect. The silence deepened. Guests shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another, no longer amused. Francisca stood motionless. The tray clutched against her chest, her head still bowed but her ears ringing with the weight of Trent's words. Jude's face tightened, his pride pricked. "I meant no harm," he muttered. "We were only laughing." Trent didn't move closer, didn't raise his voice, but the authority in his tone left no room for debate. "Then laugh at yourself, not at her. She has done more here tonight than most of us. Without her, this celebration would have been far less." The room was utterly still. Even the music seemed distant now. Jude swallowed hard, muttered something inaudible, and stumbled backward into the crowd, his bravado leaking away. Trent turned briefly to Francisca. Their eyes met for a fraction, hers wide, shaken, searching. He gave the smallest nod, then stepped back, resuming his place among the guests as though nothing had happened. But for Francisca, everything had changed. Her heart pounded, her face still hot with shame, yet beneath it was something else, a fragile, startling realization. Trent had not only noticed her, he had seen her, defended her. In a room where she was invisible, he had made her presence undeniable. As the chatter slowly returned, Francisca retreated to the kitchen, the tray still trembling in her hands. She pressed against the counter, breathing hard, her mind replaying his voice. For the first time, she wondered if she was more than just the driver's wife in his eyes. The night after Trisha's glittering birthday, the flat felt nothing like celebration. The single bulb above the sitting room hummed faintly, casting long shadows on the peeling walls. Jude slammed the door shut as he entered, his shirt unbuttoned at the neck, the stench of alcohol clinging to him. "Francisca!" His voice cracked through the silence. She emerged slowly from the kitchen, her pale lilac gown neat but trembling slightly at the hem where her hands gripped it. "Yes, Jude." His eyes burned. "You think I don't hear what people say? You think I am a fool? The whole place is whispering about you and Sir Trent." Her breath caught. "It is not true. I only—" "Shut up!" He shoved a chair out of his way, its legs scraping the floor. "Don't play innocent with me. You walk into that mansion as if you belong. You speak your small English, you cook your food, and suddenly you think you are more than the wife I married?" Francisca's voice quivered. "I never thought that. I only—" Jude advanced, his finger stabbing the air. "Do you know how it makes me look? My own wife, the subject of gossip? People saying Sir Trent looks at you too kindly. That he defends you like you're something important. You shame me, Francisca." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her hands to her face, but the words tumbled out, raw and broken. "I feel safer with him than I do with you." Jude froze. The room seemed to still. She lowered her hands, her voice trembling but firmer now. "He speaks to me with respect. He listens. He never mocks me. With him, I do not feel small. With you, every word is like a stone." The silence after her confession cut deeper than any insult. Jude's jaw clenched, pride warring with disbelief. His fists curled, then opened, his breath heavy with rage he could not shape into words. "You dare compare me to him?" His voice was low now, dangerous. "Your own husband?" Francisca sobbed, shaking her head. "I did not mean—" But Jude was already storming toward the door, his steps pounding like hammers. Enough, he spat. If Trent is the man who makes you feel safe, then let him face me. The door slammed so hard the walls rattled. Francisca sank to her knees, tears streaking down her face, her body trembling. She clutched the edge of the chair Jude had shoved aside, whispering under her breath, God help me. The night outside swallowed Jude's heavy strides as he marched toward a confrontation neither of them was ready for. The mansion was hushed in the late evening. Most of the staff retired to their quarters. Trent was in his study, papers spread across the polished desk, when the front door slammed. Heavy footsteps stormed through the corridor. Where is he? Jude's voice bellowed. A guard's voice rose in alarm, but Trent's calm baritone cut through. Let him in. Jude appeared in the doorway, his chest heaving, his eyes bloodshot with drink and fury. Trisha in a silk robe trailed behind, her face taut with confusion. Trent remained seated, his expression composed. What is it, Jude? You know very well, Jude jabbed a finger at him. You have stolen my wife. You hide behind fine words and money, but I see the way you look at her. You think because I am your driver, you can take what belongs to me. Trisha gasped softly. Jude, stop. But Trent rose slowly, his height and stillness dwarfing the chaos Jude carried. No, Trisha, let him speak. His eyes fixed on Jude. You accuse me of stealing, Jude. Tell me, what have you given Francisca that I could possibly steal? Jude blinked, thrown. She is my wife. That is enough. Trent's tone sharpened, quiet but edged with steel. A wife you mock in public? A wife you shame before strangers? You feed your pride, your drink, your women. But what do you feed her? Not respect, not safety, not love. Jude's fist clenched. Don't lecture me. She is mine. Trent stepped closer, unflinching. Yours to belittle? To silence? If a man treats his wife as less than human, does he deserve her loyalty or her heart? The words struck harder than any blow. Jude faltered, rage flickering into something more fragile, though he quickly masked it with a scowl. Behind them, Trisha's voice cracked. Trent, what are you saying? Trent turned, his eyes steady on her. I'm saying I can't pretend anymore. Whatever future we imagined, my heart is not in it. You care for the show, the champagne, the silk gowns. But I've found something different, something honest. Trisha's lips parted, her face draining of color. You mean her? Silence answered louder than words. She stumbled back a step, her hand gripping the robe at her chest. All this time, Trent's gaze returned to Jude again, firm. Francisca is not stolen. She was lost long before she found dignity in herself again. You lost her, Jude, the moment you chose pride over kindness. Then his voice dropped low but lethal. You are finished here, Jude. Consider yourself dismissed, effective immediately. You will never drive for me again. And hear me clearly. If anything happens to Francisca, if you dare lift a hand against her, I will hunt you down and make you pay in ways you cannot imagine. Jude's bravado cracked, his face paled, anger collapsing into something smaller, fright. His lips parted, but no sound came. Trent flicked a hand toward the doorway. Security. 2 guards appeared at once. Jude resisted for a heartbeat, then wilted as they seized his arms. His eyes darted between Trent's unblinking stare and the marble floor, and for the first time that night he looked utterly deflated. Get him out, Trent ordered. The guards dragged him from the study, his protests fading into silence. The confrontation had left the air electric. Jude was gone, bundled out like a trespasser. Trisha stood frozen, her world cracking in the glittering house she thought she owned. Trent remained still, the weight of his words hanging in the silence. The break had come, irrevocable. Jude had lost Francisca, and Trisha, for all her radiance, had lost Trent. Months had passed since the storm. Francisca had left Lagos quietly, retreating to her auntie's modest home in River State. She found solace there, cooking, helping in the small garden, and letting the days blur until the ache of her old life dulled. She no longer wore fear like a second skin. When Trent finally appeared on the veranda one humid afternoon, she froze, the basin of water in her hands trembling. Sir Trent, she whispered, voice caught between surprise and disbelief. Just Trent, he said softly. He stepped closer, searching her face. I've been looking for you for months. She set the basin down, her heart racing. Why? Because I could not let you vanish, he answered steady. Not after everything. You deserve more than silence. You deserve choice. just like me. And I choose you, Francesca. Her lips parted, hesitating. But I am still married to Jude, legally. Trent reached into his pocket, his gaze unwavering. That can be sorted. The law is clear. I have the resources to resolve it within weeks. What matters is what you want, Francisca. From the velvet box, he revealed a modest ring catching the late sunlight. Francisca, he said, his voice low but certain, will you marry me? Not as a favor, not as rescue, as my partner, my equal. Tears pricked her eyes, but she did not tremble as she once would have. She lifted her chin, her voice clear. Yes, Trent, I will. A few months after Francesca's divorce was finalized, the wedding date was fixed. The ceremony was quiet, far removed from chandeliers and champagne. Only a few close witnesses gathered in a small church by the riverside. Francisca was radiant in her white wedding gown, her hair exotically made, her smile calm and sure. She walked with dignity, no trace of the timid village girl who once lowered her head at every word. Trent stood at the altar, his dark suit immaculate, but his eyes were not on appearances. They were on her, not with desire alone, but with respect, the kind that anchors love deeper than passion. When the vows were spoken, he reached for her hand. She placed hers firmly in his, the touch steady, unafraid. For a long moment, they held each other's gaze. Around them, the world seemed to pause. The distance between wealth and humility, power and silence, all bridged by the fragile, enduring bond that fate had carved between them. Their hands clasped, fingers entwined, became the final image. Two lives joined, proof that even the most impossible gaps could be crossed by patience, respect, and love. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.